this week's episode of Wargame Wednesday, featuring Lorenzo and G from that'syourgarbage.com. This week we are playing another game of Dropzone Commander. This time we've printed off a bunch of the paper or cardstock terrain that's available on the Hawk Wargames website in order to give this battle a better type of terrain more suited to the game itself. We don't have any area terrain or linear terrain of a low enough height yet, but we're working on that. We'll eventually have that.
Yeah, we're working on like parks and stuff.
Yep, we were playing two of the starter armies this week, exactly as they come from the website. I'm playing the UCM, and G's playing the Post-Human Republic. So this week, this episode, we're going to play the Targets of Opportunity mission again that we played on our first video, because we want to see the difference when you play this scenario with something approaching an adequate amount of the type of terrain they recommend for this game.
We're close, we're not there yet.
Right, we're not quite there yet, but at least we're much closer than we were in the previous game. Because we had nowhere near enough terrain.
No, are you
There was
kidding?
way too much open space.
There's way too much unobscured line of sight, yeah.
Right, and another thing we're going to do differently with this video is we're going to try and give quite a bit more detail about how the rules work and the mechanics of the game. So for those of you who don't have any experience with this game, as it's still fairly new, you get a better idea of how the game works and how it plays.
Yeah, I mean, so that means this video will be a lot longer.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you've never played the game or if you were thinking about it, this is probably what you want in a bat rep.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, if you don't want that, watch the previous video, which will have us just basically playing on an open field, and the game was over in, I think, like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But alright, so we're going to set up for the first turn, and then we'll come back and annoy you with rules.
Yeah.
And, we're going to argue a lot in this video. Get ready, guys.
That's for sure.
Like, there's going to be knife fights.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. I have no regard for you.
No, but I definitely don't like you at all. Oh, you want to do beer of the week now?
I don't have any beer that I didn't have last week, so we don't have a beer of the week. So that's basically how it works. It's a little confusing at first because it's a little bit different than any other war game. But if you take the time to read it thoroughly, it's actually it's pretty easy to understand once you get the hang of it. And it's also useful and interesting in that this places limitations so that you cannot just take tons and tons of one kind of thing.
You can't just walk around with a whole bunch of planes.
Right.
It's not
you can't
possible.
You can't just take all planes, or you can't just take all tanks. They mentioned somewhere in the rulebook, but I believe also on the website, that in the future they also plan on introducing special characters, special commanders for each of the different armies that can alter what can be taken in an army roster. So like the numbers of what types of battle groups, for example. But those will only be able to be used with permission of your opponent.
Right.
Because they want to be able to do things that are fun, but that might not necessarily be entirely balanced. So by requiring opponents' permission, they're trying to keep it out of the core of the game.
And the core rulebook is actually designed with tournament play, in mind.
Well, yeah, right. No, but the core rulebook is designed to address all people. So if you want to play a fluffy game, a narrative campaign,
it gives you the option.
Yeah, they do everything they can to support that going on.
But
they also have tried to design these scenarios and the core rules to be as balanced as possible to allow competitive play if people want.
Exactly. Which is good.
Yeah, because we enjoy competitive play.
Yes. Okay, so that's it for army building. I mean, honestly, it'll make a lot more sense when you have the rulebook in front of you.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, we cannot
and
provide
then we'll
for
get
you.
on to describing the scenario and the deployment.
Alright, guys, so we're going to talk a little bit about the scenario and then how deployment really works in a scenario. The first thing is we're playing Targets of Opportunity again. The other video on the website, it's above this video in the same thread. We played it board with no terrain. This time we're playing it with close to what's recommended for the amount of terrain you're supposed to have. We don't have any area terrain, as we mentioned already. But other than that, we're pretty much, we're good to go. So for Targets of Opportunity, there are three structures.
Those three buildings now magically have red dice on them.
Look at that, video editing kit.
Yeah, I know. So there's the one on the far end, there's the one in the center, and here's the one on this end. Alright, continue.
Okay, so basically the army roster for this scenario is listed as standard, which means that you would use the one that Lorenzo spent 10 minutes explaining before this. Okay, so for this scenario's deployment, all battle groups begin the game in readiness. Fast moving squads start in reserve. Basically, fighter craft like interceptors and bombers, they come in off of reserve, Everything else comes in from in readiness, which means they start off the board edge and they move onto the board. Dropship mounted squads move their full move. Guys that are like just in an APC rolling onto the board would move half their movement. Squads that would walk on would move half their movement and basically go nowhere because half movement's like 2 inches.
Right.
But yeah, so if you're not in a dropship, you're coming in a half move. If you're in a dropship, you're pretty much fine just to come in.
Right.
That's basically it for deployment. The reserve stuff, you would roll a d6, and when you get the amount you need, the thing comes in. You would do that every time though.
Right.
Because aircraft.
Yeah, the way in reserve works, it's a further state than beyond in readiness.
Yeah.
So you roll at the beginning of each turn for whether your in reserve squads become available that turn. You require a 6 on the
fighters.
first turn.
If they're fighters.
Right.
If it's like a unit that comes in from reserve.
That's right. If it's no, but all fast movers, everything that starts in reserve, you have to roll for.
Yeah, but you could put like a dropship in.
Yeah, but you still have to roll for reserves.
Yeah, but not every turn.
Oh.
You said every turn. Once it's on, it's on.
Well, no, obviously once it's on.
Yeah.
No, right. You roll every turn until it comes on.
Yes.
You need a 6+ on the first turn that it's off the board, 4+ on the second, and a 2+ on the third turn, I believe.
Yeah.
For it to come in.
And then it's always a 2+.
Right, and then after that it's right.
Because the fighters
can't get better than a 2+.
Yeah, the fighters keep rolling in and out.
Right. This also applies, incidentally, as this may be relevant later in this game. If a squad carrying an objective elects to take it off the table in order to claim the extra victory point for the person holding the objective, any squad that leaves the table carrying an objective subsequently re-enters play using the reserve rules, counting the first turn subsequent to that they left the table as the first turn they're rolling for reserves.
So you don't actually lose your guys, which is good.
Right.
Because that would be annoying.
Yeah.
It's hard to get them back, but at least you don't lose them.
Yeah.
The duration of the game is 6 turns, which is actually going to be really quick because we only have 2 battle groups each.
Yeah.
Victory conditions are the player with the highest number of victory points at the end of the turn. At the end of the final turn wins. If there's a tie, you use kill points to determine the victor in the end. So basically, you got to get your objectives. You got to get them off the table.
Right.
Or stop the other guy from doing it.
Right. We won't go into precisely how you claim objectives in buildings because the rules are a bit extended and complicated.
It'll be easier to show you.
Right. It'll be easier to show you because it gets into the occupying building rules and garrisoning building rules. But for the simplest sake, leaving aside the specifics of how you garrison buildings, basically if you at the start of every turn you have occupied a building, you roll on a certain difficulty chart to see if you find the objective. If you find it, then you can take it out of the building or do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, you carry it with you until that's
right. So it's not enough to just get into those 3 buildings that have the objectives. You actually then have to locate the objectives.
Yeah, and then carry it out the next turn.
Right.
It's a big hold the loop. Anyway, there are variants. We won't get into them, but each scenario actually has ideas and designers' notes to kind of change the scenario a little bit. If you want a more fluffy game. Which really, this is a pretty fluffy game. Dropships flying in, getting objectives, getting the hell out.
Right.
It doesn't get much more fluffy than that. But anyway, there are ways to change the scenario. There are variants to the actual primary objective, so you can make that middle building worth an extra 2 victory points. So it's possible if you get 1 victory point each, that one of you has to get that and makes it in a little bit.
Yeah. One thing I should also note is that each of these scenarios gives 3 different levels at which it can be played for number of objectives.
Right.
One for skirmish level, which has the 3 buildings in the center. Then at clash level, there are 2 additional objectives.
Right, in the diagonal corners.
Right.
So one would be here,
Yep.
and one would be on the other side.
Right. And at battle level, there are 2 more additional objectives.
On the opposite diagonal corners. So
Right.
you basically end up with a crap ton of stuff to steal.
Right. So there, in a battle level version of the scenario, there would be 7 objectives instead of 3.
Yeah. And that's basically it for objectives and deployment. We can't actually show you our deployment unless we play a turn, so...
Right, because you start in readiness, you just come on the first turn, you don't start deployed on the table somewhere.
Yeah. There are scenarios that...
Okay, so G actually won the initiative roll.
I had to play a
you
card.
have to play a card to win the initiative
I never win.
Incidentally, cards are used in this game. You draw a number of cards equal to the CV value of your commander, and you can play them when the card says you can play it, on the area of effect the card says it has, on the target squad unit battle group that the card says, and it has the effect the card says. Now, if you're not using commanders, as we are not in these starter box sized armies, you can only draw 1 card each, and if you draw a card that has an area of effect that requires you to have a commander, such as their command area, you just discard and draw another card instead.
Right.
So he played a card that had a global effect that allowed him to force a reroll for the initiative and gave him an assumed CV of 5, which allowed him to win the initiative. He, on the other hand, elected to make me go first anyway.
I just wanted to make sure you went first.
Right. He wanted me to go first, so I elected to move on one of my Condor medium drop ships.
And that's the battle group with the...
And that's the infantry battle group. And I moved it up 18 inches from the board edge, measuring center to center of models, because it specifies in the rulebook you measure center to center. And it's where it is now, and I'm going to see what G elects to do with his first battle group.
Okay, so I deployed my armored battle group. That's not what they're called, but that's what they are. They have a weird, like, fluff name. I don't remember. So them, the walkers are in those dropships. The dropships are behind a building, and that's it. Nobody got deployed other than the dropships. Lorenzo's going to use his armored battle group, and then I'll come back with my troop battle group, and then it's the end of the first turn.
Okay, so I've used my second battle group, which is an armor battle group. I moved on my 2 dropships into positions behind these buildings. The one closer to the camera is my Sabre main battle tanks, and the one further away in this shot is my Rapier anti-aircraft tanks. So they're positioned to be able to flexibly react to how the situation develops, and we're going to go from there on this turn and the next turn.
I'll just... Okay, and since he did that, I also marked mine. The Ares walkers are in number 1, and the Phobos anti-air walkers are in number 2. So you guys know what we're doing now. Okay, so I brought on my troop battle group, and they're flying over there near the most right objective. That is also the end of turn 1.
Okay, so at the beginning of turn 2, I won the initiative, so I elected to activate my infantry battle group. My dropship was positioned here, you'll recall from last turn. So when you are doing deployment from a dropship, or deployment from any vehicle, you take the move value on the thing stat line, and you cut it in half. So, but while moving up to this half move, you can stop and land to deploy embarked squads or units, depending on which particular type of squadron it is in the dropship. You can land as many times as you like, and anywhere where the template that's specified for the particular dropship will fit. So the template has to fit without touching anything in order for the dropship to be able to land, to embark or disembark.
It just has to lie flat. It can touch stuff.
Disembark vehicles from it. And what's important to note is you are allowed up to a maximum of 2 embarkation or disembarkation uses per turn. So what that means is, it's a little funny the way it works because it's not trivially obvious. So I was able to move my dropship, which has a normal move of 18 inches, up to a total of 9 inches this turn. So I moved it 3 inches this way and disembarked one of the APCs carrying Legionnaires. Then I moved it 6 inches this way and disembarked the other squad, the other squadron of Legionnaires. But disembarking both vehicles from the unit, even if it's in different places, counts as a single disembarkation.
Yeah, it's considered a quick dust-off, that's it.
Right. So, in turn, both of the infantry squadrons in each of the Bear APCs was also able to disembark. So, all of the transports carried within the dropship disembarking counts as a single disembarkation.
Right.
And all of the vehicles disembarking from the air dropship counts as a single disembarkation. So in that manner, I was able to get my infantry into both of these buildings. It's worth noting that infantry can deploy from a transport directly into a structure, up to,
They just roll up to the door.
Right. As long as they're within 1 inch of the door, they can just deploy directly into the building. And so now I'm currently occupying both of those buildings.
Right.
Now, while my intention here is to, pardon?
I didn't want to have to, okay.
Right. So, while I've disembarked infantry into both of these buildings and I'm now occupying them both, I cannot begin searching for the objective until the beginning of next turn. Because I can't do that the same turn I occupy the building. So it has to be in the subsequent turn.
That makes sense.
Right. And each size of structure, it's listed in the rule book, has a maximum number of infantry bases that can be garrisoned within it. So that's the absolute maximum number of infantry bases that will fit inside the building.
Doubled.
No, doubled, right.
Yeah.
Right, double the garrison value
Yeah.
is the maximum number of bases. So even if like somebody wants to attack you by storming the building with their own infantry, if you already have double the garrison number in the
They
building,
can't get in.
you can't.
Too many people
Right.
in there. Yeah.
The garrison value has a different purpose. The reason why the maximum number of bases that fit in the building is double the garrison value is because the garrison value tells you how many infantry bases can shoot from any of the walls or windows.
Exactly.
Which is a mechanic we'll explain when we use it.
Right.
Or if we use it.
Right. Alright, so with my activation, I moved up my dropship. I deployed my Juno AFE, it got them to the door, it brought my 2 squads into the building, and the second Juno AFE is still in the dropship with its squad there because I needed to stay air mobile at the moment. And so Lorenzo's going to use his actual armored battle group, then I'll use mine, and that'll be the end of the second turn.
Okay, so I've activated my armor battle group, and on the left you'll see the dropship in its final location in the air after having deployed my 3 Rapier anti-aircraft tanks. And on the right you'll see the final position of my Condor medium dropship in the air again after having dropped off my 3 Saber main battle tanks.
Which you can kind of see there in the bottom left of the screen.
Right. So they're positioned because you cannot fire the same turn you deploy. The dropships can fire, but they didn't have any relevant targets. But the tanks cannot, vehicles deployed from a dropship cannot fire the turn they're deployed. So I position them behind the building because I want them in cover so that they can come out of behind line of sight blocking terrain next turn and fire if the need so arises.
Alright, so my slow ass shit is just deploying there because now really the next thing I'm going to do is just back up and shoot at the building because that's all I can do. Okay, so I moved up my Phobos walkers, which is the anti-air. They shot at Lorenzo's dropship. You can't see it. The one that deployed his
Rapiers.
anti-airs is dead.
Yep.
The Ares walked out, and then the dropship circled around the building. That's the end of that battle group.
Hold on. Let's explain a little bit what happened. Okay.
Okay. If we're gonna
In
talk
this
about it,
game-
hold on. If you're gonna talk about that, easy. Sorry, it's just another great shot.
Okay, so see, one of the unique things about Dropzone Commander is that only anti-air weapons can fire at aircraft. So, because of that, he used his Phobos anti-air walkers. He moved them into a position to be able to fire at my dropship. He successfully did 4 points of damage against it. It has 3 damage points total in its stats. So it died. But because it was in the air, it crash landed. And so you have to roll on a d6 table for what the result was. He rolled the crash landing result. And because the template from where the thing was destroyed covered 2 of my vehicles, he had to roll for both of them to see if they would suffer a strength 10 hit on a 4+. One of them did, and then he rolled the strength 10 hit against the energy 10 hit against the armor 10, which required a 5+ to damage it, and he did not damage it. So my 2 Rapier anti-aircraft tanks there are both fine. I guess that sort of goes to how the main way that you fire in this game is the stat line for each model tells you, the stat line for each weapon on a model tells you how far it can move and still fire, what weapons it has, what their strength is, energy is the terminology used in this game, and it tells you its accuracy, what you have to roll to hit. So if you pass the roll to hit for the number of shots that it says it has, then you roll to damage, and you roll to damage by comparing the energy of the weapon against the armor of the target on a table that tells you then what you have to roll to damage. One unique thing worth noting is that if you exceed the roll necessary to damage by 2
or more,
you do 2 points of damage.
Yep.
Right, 2 more. You do 2 points of damage. So that basically gives you an idea of how shooting works.
Okay, so Lorenzo's going to use a battle group, and we'll come back after that.
I elected to activate my infantry battle group. I rolled for both of my infantry squadrons to find the objectives in these 2 buildings and failed both rolls. I then elected to use to allocate 3 bases to this edge of the building so they could fire from the building. And if you do that with an infantry squad that's occupying a building, you can then measure range and line of sight from any window or opening on that face of the building. Then from there, I measured their 9-inch range on their missile launchers to his Phobos anti-air walkers. They were all in range. I rolled 3 shots because you get 1 shot for each base. I failed to hit with 2 of them. I hit with 1 of them and succeeded in doing 1 point of damage to one of his Phobos walkers. Because these have been allocated to this edge of the building now, they can be fired upon in a manner firing at this edge of the building. I moved my, I elected not to move the bear APC that's outside the door there, but I did move the other bear APC into a position further along the building, and I moved the Condor medium dropship that was over here, which belongs to this battle group, to this position behind this building.
Okay, so I just moved the dropship that was, dropped off this squad here over there. The guys in the building failed to find the objective, which is basically the trend for this turn. That is also the end of turn 2. Go.
Okay, so I've used now my armored battle group. My Rapier anti-aircraft tanks just scooted over a little bit so they would be out of line of sight. My Saber main battle tanks moved up to this position, and so maybe they'll be useful next turn. And I moved the dropship for the Saber main battle tanks to this position. That's the end of turn 2.
Okay, so I ended up going first, probably for the last time because I've gone first twice, and it's gonna happen. So I basically just redeployed a whole bunch of crap. The Ares are the only ones that actually shot anything. Right there, they shot at his anti-aircraft tanks and did nothing. In another one of my stellar dice rolling moments, I moved the Phobos over there with their dropship, and then I moved the Ares dropship over there, and that's basically it. So now Lorenzo's gonna win the game.
Okay, so I elected to activate my infantry squadron. I rolled for the objective in this building. I located it, and then I left the building, got with this infantry squadron. They got into the bear APC. My dropship moved to rendezvous with it, picked up the bear APC, and moved to its final position here, and it's got the dice with it marking that it's carrying an APC that has the objective. Because aircraft cannot carry objectives directly, only infantry and vehicles can, but it can of course carry a vehicle carrying an objective, which is what's going on right now. That infantry squad failed to find the other objective, but I just moved the bear APC a little bit closer to the door to balance my options if I should happen to hopefully find that objective next turn.
You're definitely going to find the objective. Okay, with my infantry unit, the battle group, whatever, I moved their APC away because they found their objective, so they're going to drive off the board. Unless something shoots at them, then they won't go anywhere. And then I moved the dropship with the other APC over there. And that's it. And that's the end of turn 3, right?
Okay, so using my armored battle group, I used the Sabres dropship to pick them up and relocated the dropship and the Sabres to this location from where they were before. And I'm going to have to move the camera to show you what I did with my rapiers, so give me 1 second. Okay, I repositioned my rapiers. I moved them 4 inches from where they were to this position, which is in front of the crashed dropship that they used to have. And I just put them in there for utilities, or cover as many lanes of fire as possible in case I want to actually try and shoot at something with them if the opportunity should arise. And incidentally, that's also the end of turn 3, so we'll see who gets the initiative to go first next turn, and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm on my goal to the initiating player this turn, and I started by taking my Condor medium dropship, which has one of the objectives in it, and moving it from where it was last turn over to here. And I rolled to find the other objective with my other infantry squad, and rather than disembarking them into their transport vehicle, which would have cost me half of that vehicle's movement, instead I passed the objective through the door to the waiting vehicle, which was able to move its full move from the entrance to right here. So now I've got both the my infantry battle group's dropship with one APC in it, and my other APC over here behind this building, which, as you can see, is quite far away from the other end of the table.
Game's
over. G's gonna have a little trouble getting to me before I can.
I'm not even gonna try. The game's over.
You want to call it here?
What the hell are we gonna do? Where are you? Yeah. Go ahead. It's over.
All right. Well, in that case, it seems that
I can't even shoot you with anything. By the time I set up to shoot, you're gonna go first next turn, and that's it.
right. So we're gonna call the game here because once I get these two objectives off the table, I will have 4 victory points, which is Yeah. Yes, because you get one for claiming it, and another one for getting it off the table. So it'd be 4, and you'd be able to claim a maximum of 2. So that would be, you can't. Since you can't overcome the point. Yeah, I mean, we really enjoy the game so far. Actually,
game's awesome.
Yeah, the game's great because one of the things that both of us have commented on in having played our second game of this now and having looked at the rules is that this game is, it's not a matter of just line stuff up and roll dice, particularly at the skirmish-sized games. The actual amount of shooting that gets exchanged is not always very much. In fact, there were only a few there was almost no shooting at all this game.
The dropship side.
Yeah. Simply because in this particular mission, your strategic objectives are much more valuable than killing enemy units. So in this case, this mission becomes more of a cat and mouse game of trying to outthink your opponent and position yourself to be able to claim a couple of objectives and get them off the table. Right. So I have sort of an advantage on that end playing UCM because my stuff is faster. So particularly I had an advantage in that I got into 2 of the buildings very early on in the game. But I actually really like the more kind of positional and cat and mouse kind of nature of this mission. I think that actually adds a really interesting element to the game more than just rolling buckets of dice would. I'm sure that there, of course, I mean, at a larger point size, at a clash or battle size, with so many more units on the table, there's going to be a lot more firepower exchanged. But at the skirmish size of this game, it becomes much more of a cat and mouse affair. So overall, it was an enjoyable game, and didn't take that long to play, actually. Skirmish-sized games don't really take that long to play because you spend a lot of your time more so on moving than rolling on buckets of dice, and you only have 2 battle groups apiece with the starter sets. So, it was a really quick game to play, and I hope you guys have all enjoyed this video and found it somewhat instructional in giving you a flavor of what the game is like. The only thing that's kind of central that we didn't really cover at all in this game is close quarters battle.
Yeah.
And
that's because I can't do it.
Right.
I just get killed.
Right. Because G's infantry squads have fewer bases. He kind of felt that last game after he tried to storm a building I was occupying.
It's statistically unlikely that I can actually beat you in close combat.
Right. So
you get 15 dice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and I get 15 dice.
Right.
So if you roll 3, 3, and 2,
yeah,
and I roll 3 and 3, you'll still win.
Right.
And you'll rout me, and I'll lose.
Right.
Thank you. It's not a thought. It's statistically impossible for me to beat you unless I put 2 squads in a building.
Right.
Which I'm too slow to do that.
Right.
Unless I take Tritons.
Right.
Which I will immediately.
Yes.
Upon building my own list.
Right. Understood. So we hope you've enjoyed this video bat rep, and we hope you found it educational. Since we tried to give as best an overview of how this game actually plays at skirmish size as we could. So leave any feedback you have on the video in the comments, and remember to check out more of our stuff at that'syourgarbage.com.
Knife fights.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
It's good.
I have no regard for you.
No, but I definitely don't like you at all. Oh, do you want to do beer of the week now?
I don't have any beer that I didn't have last week, so we don't have a beer of the week. So that's basically how it works. It's a little confusing at first because it's a little bit different than any other war game. But if you take the time to read it thoroughly, it's actually it's pretty easy to understand once you get the hang of it. And it's also useful and interesting in that this places limitations so that You cannot just take tons and tons of one kind of thing.
You can't just walk around with a whole bunch of planes.
Right. You
not
can't
possible.
just take You can't just take all planes, or you can't just take all tanks. They mentioned somewhere in the rulebook, but I believe also on the website, that in the future they also plan on introducing special characters,
Yep.
special commanders for each of the different armies that can alter what can be taken in an army roster. So what, like the numbers of what types of battle groups, for example. But those will only be able to be used with permission. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Wargame Wednesday, featuring Lorenzo and G from that'syourgarbage.com. This week we are playing another game of Dropzone Commander. This time we've printed off a bunch of the paper or cardstock terrain that's available on the Hawk Wargames website in order to give this battle a better type of terrain more suited to the game itself. We don't have any area terrain or linear terrain of a low enough height yet, but we're working on that. We'll eventually have that.
Yeah, we're working on like parks and stuff.
Yeah, we were playing two of the starter armies this week, exactly
Again.
as they come from the website. I'm playing the UCM, and G's playing the Post-Human Republic. So this week, this episode, we're going to play the Targets of Opportunity mission again that we played on our first video of your opponent.
Right.
Because, you know, they want to be able to do things that are fun, but that might not necessarily be entirely balanced. So by requiring opponents' permission, they're trying to keep it out of the core of the game.
And the core rulebook is actually designed with tournament play, in mind.
Well, yeah, right. No, but
So-
the core rulebook is designed to address all people. So
Right.
if you want to play a fluffy game, a narrative campaign,
It gives you the option.
they do everything they can to support that going on.
But the
they
scenarios-
also have tried to design these scenarios and the core rules to be as balanced as possible to allow competitive play if people want.
Exactly. Which is good.
Yeah, because we enjoy competitive play.
Yes. Okay, so that's it for army building. I mean, honestly, it'll make a lot more sense when you have the rulebook in front of you,
Yeah.
which unfortunately we
Yeah,
cannot
and then we'll
provide
get
for
on
you.
to describing the scenario
Yeah.
and the deployment.
Alright guys, so we're going to talk a little bit about the scenario and then how deployment really works in a scenario. The first thing is we're playing Targets of Opportunity again. The other video on the website, it's above this video.
Because we want to see the difference when you play this scenario with something approaching an adequate amount of the type of terrain they recommend for this game.
We're close, we're not there yet.
Right, we're not quite there yet, but at least we're much closer than we were in the previous game. Because we had nowhere near enough terrain.
No, are you
there was
kidding?
way too much open space.
There's way too much unobscured line of sight, yeah.
Right, and another thing we're going to do differently with this video is we're going to try and give quite a bit more detail about
How
how
the
the rules work and the mechanics of the game. So for those of you who don't have any experience with this game, as it's still fairly new, you get a better idea of how the game works and how it plays.
Yeah, I mean, so that means this video will be a lot longer.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you've never played the game or if you were thinking about it, this is probably what you want in a bat ref.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, if you don't want that, watch the previous video, which will have us just basically playing on an open field, and the game was over in I think like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But alright, so we're gonna set up for the first turn, and then we'll come back and annoy you with rules.
Yeah.
And we're gonna argue a lot in this video. Get ready, guys.
That's for sure.
Like, there's gonna be in the same thread. We played it board with no terrain. This time we're playing it with close to what's recommended for the amount of terrain you're supposed to have. We don't have any area terrain, as we mentioned already. But other than that, we're pretty much, we're good to go. So for Targets of Opportunity, there are three structures.
Those three buildings now magically have red dice on them.
Look at that, video editing kit.
Yeah, I know. So there's the one on the far end, there's the one in the center, and here's the one on this end. Alright, continue.
Okay, so basically, the army roster for this scenario is listed as standard, which means that you would use the one that Lorenzo spent 10 minutes explaining before this. Okay, so for this scenario's deployment, all battle groups begin the game in readiness. Fast mover squads start in reserve. Basically, fighter craft like interceptors and bombers, they come in off the reserve. Everything else comes in from in readiness, which means they start off the board edge and they move onto the board. Dropship mounted squads move their full move. Guys that are like just in an APC rolling